Right. Throughout this whole filming process, so many questions came to my mind, but my biggest question, especially after seeing so many ladies and seeing so many, hearing different stories from them,
Mm.
um, after you hearing our stories, are there any eye openers that you've seen?
Yeah, thank you, Dunia. Absolutely. Like as I was sitting there and, talking to the other sisters and to yourself as well, there was a lot of eye-opening moments, honestly. Like it's a long list, but one of them I would say is like the theme that ran across all the eight sisters that I had the opportunity and the blessing to speak with and interview. The one key one I would say is the theme of wanting to do more for our community, wanting to do more for our city. So, like, regardless of what's in the media, what people are saying on social media, and the growing attacks and some of the violence that has been occurring in our city, that didn't stop our sisters and the other Muslim sisters wanting to do more for Edmonton, wanting to do more for our community. So you, for example, I go to you as an example right away, is you organize tournaments, physical activities, sports for everyone in the city of Edmonton, right? So cuts across really young kids all the way to like older kids, and then to adults and seniors as well. And you're doing all these amazing things that sometimes I just find that aren't in the media. They aren't at a large scale or in a large space. So unfortunately, Edmontonians don't get to see some of the amazing work that Muslim sisters are doing right here, right at home in our city, coming from a non-Muslim community and not necessarily in that Muslim spaces. But then we don't take the step. I mean people from the non-Muslim community, aren't always taking that step to go and embrace the invitation that comes from Muslim brothers and sisters to come and get to know more and learn more about your religion. So my hope is that this little docu-series we've done, that more people will be willing to embrace the invitation that comes from Muslim brothers and sisters, whether that is to come to the masajid, to come to the mosque, or whether that is to come have coffee or just say hello to your colleague who's Muslim or a student who's Muslim, or the lady on the street, the guy on the street, give them a smile, say hello. Whether that's how we start that conversation, my hope will help people take a step forward to say hello, how are you, and let me get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, so I have a couple of questions for you as a producer of this film. The first question is, what was one of your biggest concerns in the making of this production, and how did you go about solving it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Khadija, for that question. That's an excellent question. I would say it is telling the story of people who are not necessarily in my community or that I'm not part of their community. And how would that be looked upon? These sisters are coming out of their comfort zone and telling someone who they don't know, who they've never really met. I mean, maybe some might have seen my work on YouTube or a podcast, but they don't necessarily know me, and I'm not a member of your community as a Muslim woman. So for me, that was a concern producing this content, because I wanted people to trust me as a storyteller, to know that storytelling is about showcasing your voice and illuminating experiences, and it's also about allyship. And as a non-Muslim, I want to connect that way. I want to build bridges that way. And it's my hope that every other non-Muslim who are hearing, watching this, or anything similar to this, are thinking first off, how do I go beyond my comfort zone? How do I come out of my bubble, my community, my space, my whatever, and connecting with the other community in the interest of allyship and inclusion and diversity. So again, that was a big concern for me, because I didn't want people to feel offended that I'm telling a story that isn't mine. Yeah, so I would say to me, that was a big concern, is how would this be viewed coming from a non-Muslim woman?
Yeah, beautiful. I love that you said the word allyship. I think that that's incredible, and it's needed in every community to be able to support one another.
Mhm.
And I guess my next question for you is, what is your next project? I mean, whether it is the same kind of theme of allyship or production for you, what is it that you see in the future moving forward?
So I have so many ideas. A lot of my ideas come first from my podcast that I run, and I've had the opportunity to interview a variety of men and women on my show. And through that, I do extensive research to understand like what's the current issues, where's the need, and then how can I bring those conversations to the forefront of people's mind through my platform and keep that conversation going. So my next project is one that I hope would target youth, and that would be youth from historically marginalized communities and get to understand some of the issues that impact them here in our city. So I will be talking about all kinds of things from mental health. I'll also look to talk about adultification among Black people. So there's this concern that Black children are seen as older in a lot of spaces, and that includes in education spaces, in healthcare spaces, and all kinds of spaces when they really are younger children, but they're seen as adults, and therefore they have different expectations. And then there's the issue of incarceration. We know that racialized youth have a higher percentage of incarceration, a higher percentage of unemployment, and just overall success in this part of society. So I want to talk about those kinds of stories. I've talked about Black women. With this one, I've talked about Muslim women. So the next thing I would hope to produce is something that targets racialized youth in our city.
Amazing. So it sounds like a lot of your inspiration comes from your podcast episodes and the voices that you hear. So how can I listen? How can I go and connect with all these voices and really be inspired by the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the name of my podcast is called The Unfiltered Real Talk, and really anywhere you can find podcasts or even on YouTube, you can find out there. When you listen, connect with the topic. Like, what have you done now that you've watched this conversation that you and I are doing, and all the sisters have given us your time and your wonderful stories and experience to help us learn? What are you going to do after you've watched? What are you going to do after you've listened? And to me, that's the key and the big issue. As an example, on my podcast, there was this young lady shares her experience living in the refugee camp in Ghana. She actually, I believe, was born there or moved there when she was like a toddler and lived in the refugee camp for 15 years. This is a remarkable, bone-chilling, riveting story that I think everyone really needs to know about. So she comes on Unfiltered Real Talk podcast and shares all these experiences, even goes on to tell me how on her YouTube channel, where she shares her experiences, living and moving out of a refugee camp and immigrating to Canada eventually, someone else, a youth, reached out to her to say, your story has blessed me. I still live in a refugee camp right now, but I'm so confident that one day I will be like you. I would have a testimony that I am out of here and studying and doing great things with my life. So it's so important to me that I don't necessarily only share the stories of people in my community because it might just bless one person.
Wow. Amazing. I absolutely love that. That was incredible. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Well, it's been lovely connecting with all of you, all of the women, and
Yeah,
I can say that that has been the
absolutely.
highlight of this project is really hearing the different perspectives and the different stories. So thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with all of you again.
Storytelling is so dear and near to my heart, and it's important to me that the stories I bring forward are a true reflection of the people who've shared them, who've trusted me with your story. So I think all the thanks and all the gratitude actually goes to you and all the sisters and everyone who helped produce this content, because it's really your work and it's truly to you all that all the gratitude goes to. So thank you as well, Khadija.
Thanks so much.
When I first met you and you called me to help come do this docuseries, I thought you were Muslim. And I had asked you because you were talking, like you said assalamu alaikum to me, and I think you said something else that I was like, oh, she must be Muslim. And I was actually asked when you wanted to come to the mosque and do it, they were like, is she Muslim? And I said, oh yeah, she's Muslim. And then when I met you, I was surprised to see, and when you told me that you weren't, I was like, oh, okay. So obviously the first question that came to mind was, well, why do you want to do a docuseries on Black Muslim women? Because you did one for the Black women, and now you want to do Black Muslim women. So I just wanted to know why.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophie. And it's a couple of reasons, but I would say the two key ones is first off, I have Muslim friends. And as the attacks and the violence started happening sadly here in Edmonton, that became the second reason. And the opportunity actually presented itself through the Talents Grant. And so I wanted to take this story and all that has been happening into a docuseries where I can get non-Muslims such as myself to understand some of this critical issue. It can get overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, on social media, and unfortunately, there is also misinformation. And people tend to run with hot topics or what is controversy without really doing a deep dive in the key issues or the true issues. And without even just having a plain, good old, simple kitchen table conversation, such as you and I are having right now, with the person who actually will give us the first-hand information. We rather run to what we see on social media or what we hear on TV. And so I was looking for a way to take these conversations to a space where people can truly reflect on their personal practice, on what they hear, what they see in the media, and what they end up believing, and what they end up like accepting as the truth. And so my hope is that when people watch this docuseries or any docuseries such as this one, that they take the time to connect with people who don't look like themselves or sound like themselves, and get that first-hand truth from them over what you hear.
EJ, the other question I had for you then is, how do you approach a topic that you don't know much about? What's your thought process, and how do you go about, gathering information? Take me through your
Yeah, for sure. So essentially you're saying, what are you doing here is none of your business. You're not a Muslim sister. Why are you talking about us? You know what? What I should also say right off the top is I come from a country that is predominantly Muslim. Okay, so I'm from Nigeria, and anyone who's familiar knows that we have a large population of Muslim there. So I do feel that I have some connection there. And again, the friends that I have formed here. So I would say the first thing my process is to understand the topic, right? And why is it connected to me? Why me? Why am I telling this story? And I feel that as a non-Muslim, the first thing you want to do is, when you're bridging the gap with other communities, whether it's non-Muslim or not, is to think about coming from a place of allyship. Think about coming from a place of empathy. If this was me, what sort of help would I be hoping for someone else who doesn't look like me? And as someone who has a podcast, because all of this started from my podcast, by the way, I've already started sharing the stories of Muslim women on my podcast, right? So that is another process, is going out there and talking to the people who are impacted by it, trying to get a sense of some of the experience. Obviously, I don't have the lived experience. So another thing I did is go out there and visit. So I went and visited a couple mosques in our city. And something that was really interesting to me was that they would have two separate entrances. An entrance for sisters and entrance for brothers. And then usually, in one of my visits, why and giving me the understanding of that background. And the different mosques that I visited, actually also here in Edmonton, I just remember feeling really welcome there and wondering, why are all these speculations out there? You want to ask yourself, what have you done to make sure that you have all the facts, right? You know the truth. And that should start from a place of where you approach the other community and you hear from them, you visit them, where they have open houses or open spaces. The one that I attended was an open house, and you ask questions, and that's what you're there for. That's what they wanted to do.
So last question, EJ. What is one misconception after watching this docuseries that you think that the people will unlearn?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you so much. I think since 9/11, clearly, this is probably when we saw a peak or growth in these kinds of misconceptions that just kind of took hold of the media, spread like wildfire, and everyone's grabbing into these lies and turn it into reality, which is false and obviously wrong. And so I'm hoping that seeing all the amazing work that is done in our city by multiple people, by these tons and lots of Muslim men and women who are doing phenomenal work in our city and growing and supporting the development of the city of Edmonton. So I hope that we've been able to debunk that myth and that misconception.
Thank you so much for setting this up. I'm really excited to ask some questions. So my question for you, do you believe it is possible for us to strive towards creating a society completely free from discrimination? And if not, what would progress in this regard look like to you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dalal. That's a really good question. Honestly and candidly speaking, as a Black woman, as a racialized woman, as someone who is, part of the non-dominant culture or part of the non-dominant society, I feel like in any society that you go to where you are not part of the dominant culture, it's possible that one might think or feel that you can't truly eliminate discrimination. And that is my personal opinion. That's my personal belief. I'm not sure that we can live in a world that is completely free of discrimination, of racism, of inequities and inequalities, because just the human nature with us is often one that is competitive and competing for resources and competing to say that I'm better than you, or my ways of doing and knowing and believing are better than the next person next to me. But it is my hope that with more knowledge and more research and better understanding of how differences and diversity actually are strength and bring people together to do more rather than apart to do less, that people embrace that differences and embrace that uniqueness that we all have as strengths. And I think that's what this conversation is all about. That's what is, let's come together to understand who we are. Let's come together to have a better appreciation of how my differences are not a threat to who you are or a threat to who you want to maintain as an identity or as a person, but rather the beauty of those differences can help us leverage our strengths and be better human beings, better sisters, better brothers, better friends and neighbors. And that is my hope. So even if we may not truly eliminate discrimination and inequities and inequalities all through society, all around the world, but I'm hoping that through conversations and dialogues like this and research, and that people understand the importance of our uniqueness and being more accepting of our differences rather than wanting to for us to all be similar, all be monolithic, all be homogeneous, because that's not a possibility, but rather that we all embrace who we are. And when you come from that place, then we are directly and indirectly working towards decreasing the occurrences of racism and discriminations and all those kinds of inequities.
So I have another question for you. I'm wondering, do you think social media helps or hinders your work towards a more inclusive society?
That's an excellent question. And I don't think it's a yes or no question. I think it's a yes and no question. And I'll explain why. So yes, social media can hinder our work and everybody's work towards a more inclusive society. In this particular context, we're talking about, Muslim women. So what are people finding on social media? What are you finding online? What is mainstream media in general saying about a specific group of people? If you go out there on social media, you're going to find all kinds of information to support your theory and to support your personal practice or your personal belief of whatever that is. But social media can also be a good thing in the sense that it's a way to counter that misinformation and too much information that's out there. There are people like you and I who are, speaking on using social media as a platform, as a medium to talk about the truths and the realities of all kinds of concepts and all kinds of issues, and to debunk myths, right? And debunk misconceptions that people have believed over time that have been tainted on social media and on the internet in general. So this is an example right here. Us having this conversation it is on social media, it is on the internet, right? And we are using those platforms to talk about these realities that you and I face and these issues, in the hopes that people will watch and listen and do better. And now that they know better, right? So I think social media can be a good and bad thing. I think at the end of the day, people just need to make sure that you're doing an internal reflection and assessing the information that you're receiving. Ultimately, if you want a source of truth beyond social media, beyond the internet, have a conversation with that person, is what I would say. And get to know them, get to know about your religion, get to know about your idea on politics, your idea on culture, or what have you. When you get that truth from the source's mouth, is often way better than what you find on social media or what you find on the internet. Keeping in mind that social media and the internet, back at it again, is still a source that we can use to disseminate good information that can really support people's understanding.
Beautiful. Yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes social media creates like our own reality, especially with algorithms and all that. But I think
there you go.
It's the
That's
harder
another
thing
big
to do.
one.
Yeah, it's the harder thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do, is really just step out of your comfort zone and get to know one another instead of staying in our little bubble. And that's a reminder to myself as well.
Yeah, that's a reminder to all of us, right? And I hope that the conversations that we are having, and for people who will be watching and listening, will also trigger them to want to do the same thing and carry this forward.
What surprised you the most as you were doing all these incredible interviews?
There's a few things that surprised me, but I would say the one thing would be the willingness for people to be open and vulnerable with me. And the reason is because these were all sisters that I did not know until I started doing this docuseries. Oftentimes, when people are connecting with people who are not necessarily in the community or who don't look like them or are not in your space, there's always a hesitation of our preconceived notions and our stereotypes and things we've generally put ourselves in a box of how we understand people or groups of people and all of that. But ultimately, when we take the time to reach out and talk to someone, then we get to know more about them. Then we get to see a lot of the similarities that we all share. I think that is a surprising piece, and it's a welcoming piece that I hope that people who listen and watch this conversation will take it as a clue to, embrace the invitations that Muslims are giving to people all over Edmonton and all across the world, and get to know each other more and more beyond folks that are just within our own circle.
That's so lovely. And I feel like it kind of answers the second question, but I'm going to ask it anyways because I'm curious if there's.
Okay.
So what's one learning, an insight that you gained in this process that you want to take forward with you, but also that you really want to share with others?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that one insight is one that I hope that people who also watch this will also learn and share with others in and outside of your circle. And that is coming from a place of empathy and compassion. And Salima, you say this very beautifully in your conversation. A lot of the sisters do as well, but you go in a little bit deeper and talk about how you teach it in your course, in university. And I think that's so important. Before we get to embrace a concept that we don't understand, before we get to understand the background, embrace a community, a person, whatever that may be, that is completely out of our way of knowing and being and understanding, we must first be open to understand it. We must come from it from a place of empathy and compassion, and then we may be willing and more open to accept what we've now learned and to look at it from that other side. So I think for me, that's like one thing that I have learned, and I hope that anyone who watches this docuseries and listen to it will also take that forward. Yeah.
Awesome.
have a couple of questions for you as I was thinking about this process. And my first question is, what and who inspires you every day to keep pushing on when it comes to your life professionally and personally?
That's an excellent question. I would say the number one thing that inspires me, that motivates me, that keeps me going is God, to be honest. Knowing that this is my service to God, this is my service to my community, this is my service to humanity. This is something that I hope will bless somebody. Above all, is my service to my God. It's my own way of doing what God has dropped in my heart to do. So I would say, like, my key driver, what keeps me motivated, what keeps me going, is knowing that this is my purpose, and this is what I'm called to do. Yeah.
Well, I have the privilege of knowing you, and for you and me knowing that this is what you're doing makes me feel really good inside, because I can cherish that. I embrace that, and I love that you're doing that. And the fact that I know you just makes it even better. So thank you for doing that. And you're seriously leaving a great, like you said, it's your purpose, but you're also leaving some type of legacy behind too, that people will remember you for, and your family. So you're doing a great thing, and I'm just so proud to have got to met you. And my second question to you is, what is your favorite saying or statement, and what it means to you in your life?
One of my favorite quotes is by a renowned tennis player, Arthur Ashe, and it says, "Start where you are, use what you have to do what you can." So basically, to me, that just means that there is really no excuse not to start something, whatever it is. It might look big, huge, and intimidating. It might look like you're the only one doing it, but soon and really quickly, once you begin, you find out that you're not the only one. And sometimes maybe you are the only one, but then other people get on that.
That just hits it on the nail, and it has such a deep meaning to it. So it can almost be universal in every facet of anyone's life.
Absolutely. Just start with what you have and do what you can and use what you have. And so that's what I would say. Don't wait for that perfect moment. Don't wait for when you have all your ducks in a row, you have your T's crossed and your I dotted. Don't wait for perfection in order to do something great.
And thank you for sharing that with me today, EJ. And I'm very honored. I'm very honored to be one of the 8 women that gets to tell her testimony, her story.